Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo, what up, Bolt fam? It's the director. Chargers fans. What a game yesterday, am I right? That was a wild one. Of course, I would say that this game definitely lived up to its potential of being an exciting and entertaining game for sure. Of course, a lot of us expected this with last year's score of 47-42, a narrow victory for the Chargers. This year, maybe not quite as dramatic, 38-28 in terms of like total points scored, but there was plenty of drama at the end of that game. Yes, Chargers fans, we will be talking about that infamous fourth down decision by Brandon Staley by the end of this video, okay? We will be covering that, but there is a lot to unpack in this one, both some good and some bad, but for the most part, this was a really fun game to watch with a lot of good things that the Chargers can use moving forward. And again, the Chargers ultimately squeaked out this victory versus the Browns, taking them to 3-2. Ultimately, a win is a win, baby, even though it could have come with maybe a little bit of less drama at the end there. So before we do get started, guys, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. We got a couple of pretty nice wins yesterday. I think resulted in about $160 in them pick'ems. We're right back at it today, baby, with the Monday Night Football slate. If you guys want to copy these picks, please feel free to do so. Also, leave your opinion in the comments section of what you think is going to be going down tonight. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100 and get in on the action. Finally, as your final reminder today, guys, we do have a giveaway ending at this point, what, in like 8 hours or something like that. Last chance to get in on the giveaway. Hit up the link in the description. Follow the link there. Very simple. And make sure you are subscribed. Only subs can win. Good luck to everybody. And of course, we are also giving away this signed LaDainian Tomlinson jersey to one of my crew members. All you got to do to enter for this one is be a member of my crew, and that is it. Thank you, everybody, so much for all the support. I did mention this on my live stream, but we have passed 40,000 subscribers. All thanks to you guys. And this is my way of saying you guys rock. Thank you so much for all the support. With that, let's get into this one. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at Browns Week 5 post-game report on a Victory Monday, all right? We're going to try and keep the energy up in here and be excited because despite everything, the Chargers are now 3-2 and trending in the right direction. So the first thing I want to talk about this game, which honestly, it kind of gets me giddy, dude. Like, this is one of those things in football where you're like, wow, we really have something very unique and special in this particular player, and it is going to be Mike Williams, dudes. Mike Williams, this guy's a freak, man, in the best way possible. I'm over the moon with how Joe Lombardi has been utilizing Mike Williams these last few weeks. Of course, you guys talk to me, or I talk to you guys so much about, you know, what Mike Williams is as a player to me. He is much more than just that possession receiver that maybe we drafted him to be, that contested catch guy. Finally, Mike is being used as a true X receiver, living up to that wide receiver one contract the Chargers paid him this offseason. He has been unbelievable these last few weeks, totaling what, over 250 yards over the last 2 games. Absolutely incredible. And that does not come as a result of tossing it up 50-50 to Mike Williams 20 times over the last 2 weeks. No, they're using Mike Williams way more intelligently in terms of expanding his route tree a little bit and letting him get more involved as a traditional wide receiver in the X position would. He's much more than just a possession receiver. The guy is versatile, and he's proving it every single week now. And the cherry on top is what separates him from almost every wide receiver in the league. Mike Williams and his contested catch ability is absurd. Like, it literally is one of, if not the best in the entire NFL when it comes to that specific trait. It almost feels like we're playing Madden out there. For you guys that play Madden 23 this season, if you've got a wide receiver that's over 6'3", they're going to be catching contested catches like crazy. You toss that thing up, they're coming down with the ball. And it feels like Mike Williams is out here living his best Madden 23 life in real life every single week. He's playing video game football out here. absolutely insane. In my mind, it's incredible to see his role expand in terms of his route tree and how they utilize him as a wide receiver while also keeping intact his biggest strength. We're starting to see a balance there. There's a nice balance of let's get Mike Williams out there on the slant, Mike Williams out there on the post, while also not being afraid to toss it up to him in one-on-one coverage with a guy like Denzel Ward, of which we saw a couple of insane plays that should not be a completed pass if it's anybody other than Mike Williams. Absolutely incredible. Mike is really slowly turning or taking on that role of a wide receiver one, which is huge, as the Chargers will be getting their best wide receiver back very soon in Keenan Allen. And the beautiful part is both of these guys are going to be very dominant from different roles at the wide receiver position. Mike Williams, of course, at that X position, very, very good. And then Keenan Allen is one of the more dominant players in the slot, even on the other opposite end of Mike Williams. The Chargers wide receiver problems are going to be solved very, very quickly and are actually not as bad as I once thought with Mike Williams right now. But when Keenan Allen comes back, it's going to get even better. That also does motivate me to just kind of sprinkle in as a side note here, the Chargers wide receiver situation. It could indeed get better with the addition of a guy like Odell Beckham Jr., but we still do have Josh Palmer. And I do have to note in this game in particular, though, that Josh Palmer is struggling a little bit to get on rhythm with a Justin Herbert. A lot of passes that should have been completed, maybe a little bit more of availability will add a little bit of confidence, at least in myself, in Josh Palmer going forward. So just a sprinkled note there at the end. We need to see a little bit more from Josh Palmer going forward as well. Next up, another huge star in this game is going to be Austin Eckler, who, in my opinion, we said this last week, we're going to make it official now. Austin Eckler is officially back, okay? A lot of fantasy owners, myself included at some points, a little bit nervous about Austin Eckler and his production as he had a bit of a slow start, but what more can I say at this point, right? The team has officially gone back to their roots. They understand that this offense, in a large part, runs through Austin Eckler. And Eckler is one of the most important parts of this offense, and now the team definitely knows it, and they're going back to committing to that. That's absolutely essential to this team's success offensively going into the rest of the season. And in committing to Austin Eckler, good things happen, right? Committed to him last week, he had an insane 3-touchdown performance. And after that performance, Eckler put up 200 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Cleveland. This man is insane. He is winning people fantasy football leagues, and as well as he's winning the Chargers games with these kinds of performances. Very, very nice to see Austin Eckler back. And again, after a slow start to the season, it's incredible to see Joe Lombardi and his coaching staff come back to their senses and say, hey, man, this was working so well last year. Let's get it to work again. But they also had an objective this last offseason, making sure that Austin Eckler is ready and available all the time, right? Keeping the longevity of Austin Eckler available to the team long term. And a big part of that plan was this man, number 25, Joshua Kelly. This is a trend that I think is going to continue, by the way, with Austin Eckler. I think we're going to see this for the rest of the year in terms of Austin Eckler is back to being what he was last season. But all of a sudden, it feels sustainable with the emergence of a guy like Joshua Kelly, does it not? Kelly put on a great show yesterday, too, showing and proving that he really is the Chargers running back, too. He's more than proven himself as the RB2 of the Chargers. And this duo does a couple of things for your run game, right? It not only helps keep Austin Eckler fresh, but as well as keeps a legit threat on the field at all times. Ironically, it kind of feels like the air version of the Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb combination. Those guys are dominant on the ground. Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly, very dominant through the air, but offer a lot on the ground as well. And finally, we're seeing that chemistry work in unison with a true RB2. Hats off to number 25, guys. I'm going to say put 25s in the chat, too, or 25s in the comments section as an appreciation to Joshua Kelly, who's really helping the Chargers run game get to where it needs to be to help this balance, offense balance itself out. Very excited about Joshua Kelly, as well as, again, last sprinkle note here on the running back segment here. We did not see Isaiah Spiller in or active on this game, and that disappointed me a little bit. We only saw one carry by Sony Michel, which probably for the best. I think it went for nothing, maybe even negative yards. I think at this point, you need to start sprinkling in a little bit of Isaiah Spiller just to see what he has to offer at RB3. Let Sony Michel and Isaiah Spiller compete for that role, because at this point, with Sony Michel like averaging less than 3, maybe 2 yards per carry, why not give the rookie a shot at this point? I was really hoping it would be this week. It wasn't. But on the bright side, we do have Joshua Kelly emerging as the RB2, which is, I would say at this point, way more important anyway. Next up, you can't run behind a shoddy offensive line, and the Chargers got themselves a good one, as well as probably one of the biggest highlights of the last 2 weeks is going to be Jamari Sawyer. We said this last week, and again, it's been reinforced. Jamari Sawyer is maybe the biggest steal in the 2022 NFL draft. And I'm not even being dramatic in that case. Maybe not even a little bit biased in that case. He may end up being the biggest steal. Sawyer has just gone out there and proven himself in one of the biggest tests this league has to offer. He faced Myles Garrett head on, one of the very best players in the entirety of the sport, and he played nearly flawless. Sure, there are moments that Myles Garrett got the best of him. It's going to happen to every tackle in the league versus this particular player, but Sawyer held his own in all 4 quarters. And that is something not just impressive for a rookie. It's unbelievable for a rookie, but any tackle in the league. I don't care if it's Trent Williams out there. I wouldn't be shocked if Myles Garrett gets the best of him and sacks, their quarterback at the time being Jimmy Garoppolo. We've got a very special player in Jamari Sawyer going forward. And again, 25s and let's say 68s in the chat. This dude is absolutely unbelievable. I love that the Chargers website had this particular photo available for this video. Myles Garrett versus Jamari Sawyer. And Sawyer, for the most part this game, definitely held his own, maybe even conquered over Myles Garrett. Sure, Myles Garrett still a little bit hobbled up, recovering from injury. But at the same time, this was a huge test for the first-year NFL rookie in Jamari Sawyer, and he stood up to the occasion, and he has shined so far. This is a very big ad for the Chargers and a very big value, one of the biggest values we've seen in the NFL draft in a very long time. Now let's talk a little bit about the guy that's been maybe the subject of controversy here, the early slate of games of the season, and that's going to be the Chargers offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi. Some of you guys may not like what I got to say about Big Joe, but I talked about it a lot during the live stream as well. And I honestly think that Joe Lombardi's on the road to redemption right now. I feel like a lot of things that he was trying early in the season just were not working out. And it feels like in this game in particular, he's going back to his roots. But one of the biggest things that I appreciate about Joe Lombardi in this particular game, and even in last week's game, is the personnel decisions are starting to look really, really good as well. They're starting to make sense. There was even a play that failed. Right? It was a 3rd and 1, right, to convert. We saw a handoff directly to Xander Horvath. That's exactly why I think Xander's on the roster, and that's exactly the same move I would have made. That play failed, I would think, because of a broken play by Storm Norton. I think that was actually the culprit in that particular play. But that play failed, and I still very much so agreed with that play call. And that just tells me that the personnel decisions are starting to get cleaned up a little bit. I saw a lot of creativity in establishing the run this game. Lots of motion. We saw that work versus the Texans. He went right back to the well. But on top of that, he had an extra layer of play action, which was very successful as well. He did not call a perfect game by any means. It's never going to be a perfect game by the standard of any NFL team, but he called a very good game. And in these instances, I think he does deserve credit for that. I was very impressed in very many parts of this game by the play calling on offense. It did result in a score of 30 points. Last week, Justin Herbert had like 340 yards. I think Joe Lombardi is starting to get it. And I hope that this redemption story is maybe similar to another coach we'll talk about in just a second. Of course, you guys know who I'm talking about. But at this point, if there's hope for Joe, maybe there's hope for other guys down the road as well. So good job to Joe Lombardi. I'm going to give him a pat on the back for the last couple of weeks. It's been pretty impressive, at least in my opinion. You guys can go ahead and disagree with me there, but I've been feeling a lot better about Joe in the last 2 weeks versus the Texans and the Cleveland Browns. Next up, we do need to talk a little bit about this man right here, though, J.C. Jackson. And this was one that I knew that we'd be talking about at the end of this game because, again, is it time to worry about J.C. a little bit? In my preview game, or my preview video for this game, I did talk a lot about this one being the game that proves it a little bit to Chargers fans. The signing of J.C. Jackson and making it worthy, or I should say worth it, for the team to go out there and pursue one of the hottest free agents on the market. This was the game I was hoping to see, the game by J.C. Jackson, and ultimately it did not happen. J.C. was targeted 9 times and allowed 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown versus Amari Cooper. It's a lot of yards. Now, it wasn't all bad, right? He had some moments where he looked good. I think a pretty essential pass breakup in the second half. But for the most part, Jacoby Brissett was not intimidated to throw his way at all. And that's very uncharacteristic of what a J.C. Jackson could bring to a defense. J.C.'s supposed to be the guy that you do not want to target. You do not want to risk interception. At this point, J.C.'s really struggling to keep pace with many of the receivers that he's been tasked with in the first 5 weeks of the season. I would say the first couple of weeks because, yes, he was out with the recovering ankle for the first couple of games. Now, this is concerning, right? JC has struggled to acclimate to the Chargers defense. This is something that we deemed a possibility when signing him, but it was very much so not as big as the potential he brought in terms of positivity. I still do think that his recovery has something to do with it, though. That ankle surgery, having it so close to the start of the season, very unfortunate. I do think it's still hindering him at this point. Like I say all the time, your ability to close distance, having that speed and agility and burst, probably the best tool in your tool belt for a defensive back. And I don't know if JC quite has his all back yet, but I am starting to worry a bit. JC should be close to 100% right now, and if he continues to struggle, let's say here into week 6, we might have legitimate reason to worry about his long-term performance in 2022 and going even beyond that. As of right now, I still need to say that I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I still do think that recovery has a bit to do with it, but at this point, it is worth discussing. Are we worried about J.C. Jackson yet, or should we give him a little bit more time, have a little bit more leniency given his recovery status? Have to wait and see. Next segment's called This Team Needs Bosa. You guys will see Khalil Mack there on the field, and you know what? He did a fantastic job, especially versus the run in this game. That's one big strength that we knew that he was bringing to the table. But the Chargers did struggle pretty mightily in the pass rush this week. Now, the Cleveland Browns, they do have a fantastic offensive line. I'll give them credit for that, right? But so did the Houston Texans, who we faced last week. And the Chargers found great success versus them last week, too. It felt like Khalil Mack was bottled up all game here versus the Browns. And, maybe didn't have as much help as he's used to with Joey Bosa on the opposite side. And it reminds us so much of Joey Bosa's dilemma over the years as well. Just too much attention on 52. Too many resources going to stopping Khalil Mack. And I feel like it could get really frustrating for Khalil Mack not finding any space to operate. And this heavily reflects on how badly the team needs Joey Bosa going forward. It's really hard to stomach, right? As we're not going to see Joey Bosa return until like mid or late November at the earliest. It's going to be a minute. But this team does have the tools to maybe get by until then. We need to hope that someone steps up next week big versus Russell Wilson, and the Chargers, let's say schematically, find a way to get Khalil Mack free, because we still do have one of the premier pass rushers in the league, but it's not going to be as dominant as we once hoped with Joey Bosa's sideline. The Chargers need to figure this out despite these setbacks and injury, and they have to figure out a way to get Khalil Mack free. Next up, very light topic here, but I just wanted to give props to Sante Samuel Jr., man. The dude's a dog. Big ups to ASJ, man. He's been unbelievable. We talked about how maybe ASJ was our best corner right now in my game preview. I was like, hey, you know what? Hot take. I think ASJ may end up being our best corner of the season. And right now, it kind of feels that way. It feels that that's absolutely correct. He's been fantastic in coverage. And he carries huge upside for generating picks. Kind of feels similar to what we were getting in J.C. Jackson, at least what we thought we were getting in J.C. Jackson at this point of the season. He looks absolutely fantastic. Yes, he needs to clean up penalties a little bit, but he's well on his way to a fantastic season. And honestly, huge ups to him, man. He's been one of the biggest highlights on this defense for me this season, and he's been putting in the work and the performances to kind of earn that credit in my eyes. Next up, we got to talk a little bit about the run defense, because this was a big narrative going into this game last season as well as now this season. Again, the narrative last year, how did the Chargers slow down Nick Chubb? Well, we lived that narrative again this year. And you know what happened? We gave up 200 yards yet again. Now, I will say that Sebastian Joseph Day individually had a pretty decent day, right? It could have been better, though. And some people can't help but ask, why was it Tito not active for this game? Tito's one of the better, nose tackles on this team when it comes to stopping or slowing down the run. Why was he not active? That is another thing that maybe is a tally against a guy like Brandon Staley, but still, I would say that the Chargers' run defense still has a little bit more to live up to. Credit to Cleveland. I think they're the best running team in the league, in my opinion, but it would have been really nice to see some improvement in this rematch. The Chargers gave up almost identical yards to what they did last season, over 200. I think somewhere around 220 yards. It happened again. And the Chargers evidently still have a bit of improvement to do and a bit of growing to do in fixing their running defense struggles. And that's going to be a bit of a tall order as the Chargers continue on with a pretty tough running back slate on their schedule going forward. Now, lastly, this is probably the segment a lot of people came onto this video to hear about, okay? The Chargers and Brandon Staley, the fourth and Staley segment. We've already lived a few of these in the past, and here is the latest one in terms of maybe the Chargers a little bit upset with what Brandon Staley decided to do in some very crucial moments in a game with a fourth down decision. Now, let me start by saying, in this segment, this isn't to rally to fire Brandon Staley, okay? I'm nowhere close to that point yet. But I will say that the conversation is officially open for me, okay? Not to fire Brandon Staley, but something needs to happen. His seat is officially getting warm for me, okay? So with that being said, this is what I've got to say. Brandon Staley, in my mind, and this is the biggest result, I would say, of that decision, he's starting to lose the fans a little bit, as well as maybe even the locker room. His fourth down decision, in my opinion, was unacceptable, and I felt this game was called fairly well up to that point. As a matter of fact, I was praising Joe Lombardi and Brandon Staley just moments before the situation unfolded. Unfortunately, so much of that in my mind was wiped away with that last-second decision not to punt. To relive it just for a second here, guys, so we can really understand what we're looking at here. We were up by 2 points. The Browns had no timeouts. The Chargers at midfield, an excellent punter who could pin them inside the 10 from that distance. It made all the sense in the world to punt. If you really trust your defense, punt the ball. Instead, the Chargers and its fans, we all held our breaths as we watched Justin Herbert toss it on fourth down to Mike Williams on a play that should have been called for penalty, by the way, and the Chargers turn it over on downs. That's a huge yikes, man. I'm not, again, a head coach. I don't know my X's and O's as well as most people, maybe even on the YouTubers in the NFL space's minds. I don't. But just me as a casual fan watching that unfold, I was pulling my hair out. I was like, what are we doing? At this point now, the Browns just need, 5-10 yards to get into field goal range, and the game looks over at this point. I'm losing my mind. But then fate intervenes, and the Chargers, in the luckiest play of the year, watch the Browns miss that field goal, and the Bolts take that narrow victory on Sunday. We got bailed out, dudes. We got super lucky. I even said it during the live stream, man. I'm unbelievably happy for the victory, but the coaches did get bailed out, and that's something that I'm not going to forget. That carries tremendous weight with me because this left a hugely sour taste in my mouth. It felt like I was transported into the future. Does that make sense? Perhaps watching our first playoff game unfold in front of me in the Brandon Staley era. It's decisions like these that make me imagine the worst in games that have more on the line later down the road. Because at this point, I'd have to believe that we might see something similar. You know, even with our Super Bowl hopes on the line, maybe a decision like this is possible. We saw it last year versus the Raiders that cost us the playoffs, and we saw it again on Sunday versus the Browns in these games that we must win in this early part of the schedule. And it shocked me to my core. And honestly, it shocked everyone else as well. Keenan Allen even took to Twitter to voice his opinion on this as well, and it doesn't look good. He said something along the lines of, man, what are we doing? Then he followed it up with, like, man, if he would have made that, things, you know, he just wasn't happy with the decision very evidently. And this starts opening questions in leadership, which are already kind of rumored to exist, by the way. The locker room can be shaken with decisions like this. And a vet player in Keenan Allen is making his opinion known of this decision. That's not good for your locker room. And I think at this point, it becomes too much for even a guy like me. Again, I'm not going to say I represent the fans, but I am a fan. I'm a very big, die-hard fan. And if my reaction to this is any indication of the general consensus of the decision, it's not good. It shook me pretty hard. And it's becoming even a little bit too much for me at this point. I've not given up on Staley, not even close. I feel like he can sort it out. He can straighten it out. He's a very, very intelligent guy. But I'm very much so open to the idea of a guy like Sean Payton after that play. That's how much weight and gravity that play and that decision carries with me. Because a guy like Sean Payton, we've seen other teams like the Kansas City Chiefs when they got Andy Reid, right? That team changed identities. When the Jacksonville Jaguars got Doug Peterson, that team changed identities. Things like that have the power to take a team from good to great. And I feel like that conversation of Sean Payton is definitely open for me at this point. I hope and pray that Brandon Staley can bring us back into the light and get us to believe in the way that we were at the top of the season. This is the guy that's taking us to the promised land, to the Super Bowl. But at this point, decisions like that get me looking the other way, like that meme where he's looking back behind him. And I'm looking at Sean Payton at this point, man. It's hard not to with stuff like that. I really hope that's the last time we see a decision like this made in this 2022 season. But despite that, it will carry weight going on into the rest of the year. So my bottom line in this one, as we see a photo of Alohi Gilman with that clutch interception, props to him, by the way. The bottom line is this: we did get away with the win. Okay, we got bailed out a little bit. It was a lucky win, but a win nonetheless. And the objective this week for Staley is going to be keeping the locker room intact with all of the questions revolving around his decision-making, okay? Because, you know, that's what hurts the most. What should have been a victorious feeling and taking down the Browns in such a narrow and entertaining game is instead met with hesitation and anxiety. That ending put a damper on that win a little bit. I'm still very excited. There's so much joy that comes out of it. But that decision, that you do carry that a little bit. By the way, I did select this picture because of this man over here. You guys see him on the left side. Unbelievable. He couldn't believe his eyes. But despite that damper on the win, we've got to shift our focus to next week, where the Chargers will play their third division game of the year versus the Broncos. And at this point of the season, these wins are pivotal. And distractions like leadership are an unnecessary obstacle at this point. Unnecessary obstacle. But I do believe that the Chargers do have a nice little runway here now. 3-2 is definitely not bad. The opponents coming up here in the next few weeks, definitely not bad. But they've got to sort out these problems and get any question of leadership out the door before we hit that later half of slate of games, because that's where things really get kind of crazy. So in the comment section below, you guys let me know, where do you stand on Staley right now? I'm seeing kind of a line drawn in the sand. Some people are saying stick with Staley no matter what. Stop questioning. Be a fan of the Chargers. I get that, but I also understand the other side of, is this enough? Is this ludicrous and malpractice of coaching enough to warrant at least a discussion of a change of leadership in the future, especially with such a prestigious head coach like Sean Payton openly saying that he would like to join the Chargers as their head coach of the future? You guys let me know where you stand on that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Either way, man, it's a victory Monday. Go out there and celebrate. Get ready for the Broncos this upcoming game and just have fun with it. I know there's a lot of questions out there, but for right now, a win's a win. Let's focus on that and get ready for the Broncos. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Punt the ball!